Well, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm glad you guys have made it to the podcast today. We have what probably going to be one of my favorite show that we do of all time, and it's because when you see the end result, there's so many of us that work in this industry, whether we're realtors or we're, I'm a loan officer, or we're doing insurance, or we're doing the part that helps people with credit, or we're trying to do financial planning. We're all these like salespeople that are out there in the community, but the reason that we're doing it is for somebody to be able to get into a home, or for somebody to be able to use the services that we have. And it is so neat sometimes to see that happen in real time and in real life. And so I wanted to dedicate or do this podcast to a person who is first time home buyer. Her name is Midian Holmes, and a good, great friend of mine. And so she is going to be our guest today, and she just moved into her home within the last week, in the last 4 days, actually. And so we're going to just talk about all the experiences that she had, and because we're putting together the Wealth Experience. So if you go to blackwealthexperience.org, you'll get to the Black Wealth Housing Summit, which is on June 19th. Is going to be at the Cross Purpose facility that is right there on the corner of Colorado and Martin Luther King Boulevard. If you know where the AME Church is there, it's right behind. They share parking lots. So I'm not sure the sheet, but I'll make sure that the link is there. So that's going to be from 5:30 to 7:30 on June 19th. So the actual day of Juneteenth, we are going to have a housing summit, a Black Wealth Housing Summit, that we can really start talking about Black wealth, Black, generational wealth. And more importantly, we kind of realize that the first step, or one of the first steps to creating personal wealth as well as generational wealth, is home ownership, and all the things that go along, and the history of our communities, and why that hasn't been prevalent in our communities as another. We are the lowest percentage as far as ethnic or diversity that actually owns homes. We're in the Denver metro area, we're around 36% of folks that are colored that are qualified that could be able to own homes. Only 36% are actually homeowners. Where, like, even in the Hispanic community, it's 47%. And we continue to move forward. So what do we need to do to change that needle? Because when you go back to the 1970s, when we started tracking some of these numbers, we were at about the same percentage that we are now, and it hasn't changed and it hasn't grown. And so our goal is, we're going to talk about whose mortgage are you paying. So you're either paying your mortgage or you're paying somebody else's. The example that I continue to give every single time I do this is, let's say that you're paying $2,000 a month rent. And in that $2,000 a month rent, you pay that for a period of 12 months, right? So that's $24,000 you paid over 12 months. If you stay in that rental unit for 10 years, you've now paid $240,000 to rent that unit with nothing to show for it after you're done. You've literally, in most cases, paid off the person who owns that piece of property. If it's a unit in an apartment complex, you've paid off that unit in that apartment complex, because it didn't cost him most likely $240,000 to build 10 years ago for that one unit to be built. So you've now paid that off, and he continues to make money, or she, or whoever the corporation is, continues to make money on that. And you don't. And so, like, I go to these apartment complexes and I see, some beautiful cars, some Range Rovers and some Mercedes and some, whatever you can think of, Jaguars and nice SUVs, $80,000, $90,000 cars, and they're sweeping the snow off in the winter, and it's just depreciating. It's not an asset that continues to grow. And so we need you there on that day, on June 19th, at the Black Wealth Housing Summit. We are going to pair you up with a real estate agent, with a loan officer, with a credit person, with an insurance person, and with a financial person. Now, if you already have some of those, in the RSVP, you type the name of who those people are, because I want you to continue to have them. But we want to build a team around you. So some of you will be ready to purchase houses right away. Some of you might take 6 months. Some of you might take a year. Some of it might take 2 years. But we are dedicated to the purpose of making sure that we increase Black home ownership in Colorado, in Denver, and then if you are watching this from outside of the Denver metro, we're going to work in your city too. We need to increase this. So, with all that said, June 19th, get on there. Go on RSVP, go to the blackwealthexperience.org and hit RSVP and let us know that you're coming. So here's why I'm so excited. So, Medea, tell us about, let's just, this is day 4. Tell us what you're going through right, like in your mind, and your happiness and your tiredness and all the things we go through. Before we go through the process, where are you at right now, 4 days after getting into a brand new home that's yours?
So what an incredible, meaningful question. 4 days in, how am I feeling? I'm on cloud nine, Brian. Like
Mhm.
this is, it hits different. It hits different when you are, I mean, I'm sure that tons of people that are listening to this podcast or just have lived experiences, when you're in that cycle of renting and you move into a space, you have a sense of infatuation that, wow, I'm in a space, I really like it, the neighborhood is wonderful. There are certain things that really kind of drive that decision. And you start to set up your home and you know that you're going to be creating memories for your family, yourself. You're going to be a neighbor, right? And you're moving into that space. And there's a sense of belonging that you have, but it gets to a certain point. There's like this boundary that you find yourself reminded that this is not my space. This is not a home that I own. Like if the wall coloring is just a little bit off, right? Or if there's just something, those little knickknacks that are there in that space, at the end of the day, you know that there's a boundary that you can't cross.
Hmm.
But now this is my space,
Yay,
right? The
yes.
walls, every little crack and crevice is mine. And I love it. And it just, like I said, it hits different because I know that it belongs to me. Like,
Mhm.
if there is a flickering light, that's my flickering light. And of course, it's my responsibility. Who wants flickering lights? But at the end of the day, there aren't any, it's you're boundary free. Like this is something that, um, I just love it. And my granddaughter was here the other day, and I just held her and I just said, "Ma Bell bought you a house."
Mhm.
Like that's what this means
Yeah.
to me. So I told little Luna, "Look at your house, Luna. Ma Bell bought you a house." And so
Mhm.
it was just so meaningful. There's so many emotions, like you said, the happiness, the excitement, the fatigue because you are
Mhm.
tired, but you're okay with being tired, right? You're okay with like, okay, we have to set up, we have to do this, and it's just amazing. So thank you for the question, and yeah,
Oh,
incredible.
absolutely. And I think about you, you go, okay, I can actually take a nail and a hammer and
Yes,
and drive a nail into the wall all I want.
yes,
Without
absolutely.
trying to find, whatever some of the apartment guides and some of the things that they tell you can do. And then I love that, you said every nook and cranny. I think like even the driveway, right? And
Yes.
anything that goes up to the door, the front door, the back door, all of that now
Mhm.
is not just yours, here right now today in May, but it's your family's 100 years from now, if they so
Yes.
choose it to be, or if you want to use it to move up to something else, you have now that stepping stone to do it. So now I got today kind of out of the way. I want to kind of just go through your story a little bit, and if you can kind of just give us, an overview of just okay, this is where I grew up. I know you're a native here of Colorado and in Denver, and born and raised, and some of the thought process about home ownership when you were a kid compared to now, and then that process of how do I figure this out? What is it? What are some of those things and pitholes or thought processes that you have that you don't have now that maybe hindered it early on, or made you excited about making it happen later on? What kind of tell us your story?
Yeah. So, yeah, first and foremost, being born and raised in Colorado, in Denver in particular, my family has a rich history here. And in saying that, I am a descendant of a family that did not have an autobiography of money that really was designed to like foster home ownership, right? I mean, we were a family that my grandparents lost their house, and there's a story there, but they lost their house, and my mother and father, like didn't really have a process that was conducive with me being able to understand what does this process look like. So really, me going into this home ownership process has been like it wasn't written this way, right?
Mhm.
I mean, the systems by design were not created with my story in mind. So, when and let me lead this by saying I am a woman of faith, grounded in my faith. I love
Mhm.
Jesus. And so,
Yeah, right.
so that is going to be a big part of the
Yeah.
way that I narrate this story. So when you know, there was a catalytic moment for me, and it was because I was renting, and I, was reminded, that inevitable reminder that you are vulnerable to the decision of that landlord. You are
Mm.
vulnerable to that decision. So if the landlord wants to make a switch or a change, your life has to uproot. So there was a catalytic moment for me that I said, okay, I just no more, no more. I'm not going to be renting anymore. I want to go on a journey where I can root myself and ensure that I am able to simply just stay grounded and stable. So in that catalytic moment, I said, okay, how the heck am I going to do this? I have no idea. I don't know the language. I don't know the process. I don't understand what the rates are supposed to be. I don't even know what questions to ask. So I started to pray. And, I was praying to the Lord. I said, Lord, in this process, I just need grace, because I really did feel, honestly, Brian, like my mind and my narrative was conditioned to say, that's not for me. Home ownership is not for me. It was almost this question of my worth, of this is not something that I'm going to ever experience. So I
Mhm.
just started praying for grace. And I said, Lord, I just need grace. I need to just feel your arms wrapped around me as I go through this process, because I am clueless. And
Mhm.
so 2 days later, a mentor of mine just called to check in on me and just said, hey, how are you feeling? What are you up to? What's going on in your life? And interestingly enough, I decided to go into the story of, hey, I'm looking to purchase a home. Like, this is the process that I want to do. And I really am convicted. And I just want to, go into this space. And so he listened to me with intent. And he said, you know what, Median, I'm going to introduce you to someone named Grace.
Mhm.
And I said, what? And he said, yeah, I know this woman named Grace, and she is a
Wow.
lender, and she's wonderful. She's amazing. She's been doing great things. And I would love to introduce you to her. And he didn't understand what was being said in that moment, but I did.
Yeah.
And so, have like, lo and behold, Grace and I, like, we connected. And so she was my lender. And what I decided to do was I wanted to go all the way through the lending process first,
Okay.
because I didn't want to home shop. I didn't want to like look at homes and all of that. I told myself, no, that's just, I didn't feel like that would be responsible in the hope that was in my container. I said, let me go through this process first. And Grace was amazing. She was incredible. She was informative. She did the credit check. She talked me through like how, if you do these three things, you can actually, your credit score can accelerate. And then she started to really kind of talk me through what all of the steps were and everything that it meant. So I went through that process with Grace, and then I got to the point where she said, okay, this is what you're approved for. We talked about the other products that are out there with down payment assistance and, FHA loans, which is the federal side, versus conventional loans. And she was really, really informative and really helped me to understand. And so we had a great conversation. We had a great process. And we got to that point to say, okay, this is your purchase power. And so with that purchase power, I said, okay, now it's time for me to take that next step and let me find a real estate agent that I really feel like I can connect with, and that, would really see me in this story. And so I knew the next phone call that I was going to make was to someone named Chad Nash.
Mhm.
Chad is an incredible person. I went to high school with Chad. He was younger than me, but he's out here crushing it. He's out here killing it, crushing it for everyone. And the processes that he has as a real estate agent are state of the art. Like, it's top level. I mean, no matter how much purchase power you're coming in with, Chad is going to literally say, let's do this together. Let's go on a journey together. And we did just that. So connected with Chad, that process began as far as like saying, hey, this is your purchase power. And he started to send me details about, here are the homes that are available in that price range. And so my fiance and I went out one weekend, and we went and we saw 9 different homes in one weekend.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was quite the day. I mean, from top to bottom of the day, it was so much fun. And I think that it was fun because we already knew our purchase power. So we
Mhm.
weren't going into spaces saying, can we afford this? Can we not afford this? we went in already knowing like, hey, these are the spaces that are inside of our budget, and let's see what we love. So we fell in love with 4 places, and we said, okay, we need to rank these houses. Like, what's your first choice? And so we had fun with that banter. And so we got back to Chad and we said, hey, Chad, these are the ones that we love. And, Chad said, okay, and we ranked them top to bottom, 1 through 4. And so that next morning, it was a Sunday morning, Chad put in a bid for our top choice.
Okay.
And he was working diligently to put in a bid for our second choice. But by that evening, Brian, we got accepted. The seller accepted our option. And so when I was talking to Chad about, putting in the bid, he even talked me through that process. Like, this is what happens next. These are the steps. And I asked him, I said, is there a way that I can tell the seller our story? Just, how we felt when we went into the home, because it wasn't just that we love the space, we love the vibe. There's a vibe that happens. And when when you're home shopping, there's something to be said about that vibe. You can't really explain it, but there's a vibe that happens. And we wanted to make sure that that was a part of our story. And so Chad explained to us that, hey, in Colorado, or maybe it's across the country, I don't know, but it's not practice for the seller and the buyer to meet, and that is to help to prevent discrimination. So in that process, when you're putting in a bid, you don't really do that. So I said, well, Chad, can you just be the voice for our story? And he did just that. And so he called me that evening and he said that she accepted the offer. And he said, Midian, it was because of your story. She said that, she listened to your story, and that was it. Cause she had 4 other offers and she chose ours.
Nice.
Yeah. And so then we went under contract. So now we're under contract and we're going through the underwriting process, and the underwriters, again, now this is when it kind of starts to get very specific, I guess, or diligent. And so the underwriters kind of comb through all of the details with your taxes, with your income and all that. And they just ensure that they can secure this loan for you. And so there were a couple of follow-up questions that came from the underwriter that we went through. And then, I was very diligent in that process, and, not leaving much cushion for, something to fall through the cracks. And so stayed very diligent. And then we got the clear to close.
So let me, before you get to the clear to close, because I absolutely want you to get there, kind of walk me through how you felt during this process, because it's easy to say, here's the details, and they ask for information and I gave them the information, but the feelings that go along with that have to be a roller coaster for so many people. So kind of just walk me through a little bit of that, from the time that you put in that offer to and then them asking you questions. What was going through your mind? Because this is your first house. So you haven't been through this process before. So you haven't been through it. But I know it's got to be fresh in your mind because it hasn't been that long ago. Some of the ways that you were feeling before we get to clear to close.
Oh my goodness. So yes, roller coaster is absolutely the word. So there's just this sense of like, I can see it, but I can't touch it. Like, it's right there, but I don't have it yet. So there's an uncertainty that comes in that space where you're thinking in your head, like, at any moment this could fall through. Like at any moment, this can be a no. It can go from a yes to a no in a split second. And I felt, I had no control, right? Like I just had to sit and wait for my fate is what it felt. It was what it felt like. And I will say that Chad and Grace were very instrumental in talking me off the ledge multiple times, because I was curious, like, is this a good sign? Like, is what is happening, is that shifting us towards a no, towards a yes? And so they were very gracious in just making sure that I understood that this is the process. Everyone's process will be different, but this is the process, and it's a part of the story. But the feelings of ambiguity and uncertainty were hard. It was hard. And you take that day by day, and, you're kind of just in this waiting pattern to see if this is going to be truly a yes. Because again, you feel like you're so close and you can see it, you can smell it, it's there, but it's like, I can't touch it yet. So it's a waiting game. And you have to, that patience is something that it's tested, tried and true. It is tested.
Was there any time that you, yeah, because I find this in our community a lot, like I'm not supposed to have a house, or I'm not worthy of having a house, or that's for other people. Did any of those thoughts ever, go through your mind through this whole process at any time that, maybe this isn't for me? I know you kind of said that, before you started looking, but even, they ask you for that extra bank statement, or they ask you for that extra thing. Is there any of those feelings that ever came up of maybe, you know, this isn't for me, or at this point you're like, no, God's giving me a house, this is going to happen, I just got to wait? Kind of where were you at there?
Yeah, so when I absolutely, absolutely, there were moments where I was, that conditioned narrative continued to run through my mind. And when I say that Grace and Chad were there to talk me off the ledge, that's what it was. It was them reminding me that no, this is a process that you have, you have been very diligent. You've paid attention, you've listened, you've asked questions. Like, they continue to remind me that I was in this space of conviction that this is something that I can do. But that narrative, that imposter syndrome, is 100% real. It's very prevalent. And also it layers on top of being so afraid of being another Black family that is told no, right? I mean,
Hmm.
I listen to stories from my grandparents, my great uncles, and people in my family that, would tell me about the situations that they endured and the experiences that they had. And so I was very afraid of this hope that I was holding on to being bursted, because whenever something like that happens, that can change just who you are, right? That can just
Yeah.
change the way you show up, what you think about yourself, how you engage in community. And so yes, I carried that fear for sure, that what if this is another one of those stories that
Hmm.
ends up being a no for another Black family? That 36% that you talked about,
Yeah.
you question, like, am I in that 36%? And how awful is that, right? It's so low that you have to wonder, like, the odds are not in your favor. So
Yeah, they
it's
are
like,
not.
I don't, if it's only 36%, and then you kind of get into, you can get into scarcity mindset, and you can, find yourself just feeling like,
Mhm.
I am not worthy of this. And so, yeah, there were definitely feelings there. And I will say that the Lord prayer, look, when I tell you that I felt favor from the Lord when, throughout this process, and then getting over that finish line, favor, y'all.
Oh, I love it. And you really think of how important this Black Housing Summit is, not because we're just giving out information, but we're creating a community, or having you be a part of a community that can help dispel a lot of these fears that go on. Like you said, without Chad and without Grace and without people behind you, it's so easy to just say, forget it, let me go buy a car. And then you set yourself up, for another few years before you qualify, or just, because I mean, literally in 2018, we were in a situation where we were trying to buy a house. There was some discrimination that went with it, and it's like we didn't end up with the house then. And you just go through the process of, 3 out of 10 people. You think maybe almost close to four, but 3 out of 10 people, Black families, are actually able to, in this space, able to get houses right now. But we got to change that narrative, and
Yes.
it's not going to happen without us there. So now let's go to clear to close. Okay, so you get the clear to close, which means that everything is good on the lending side. I'm a lender, so I love the word clear to close, because that means I'm not asking you for anything else. We're
Yes.
ready to go. So continue your story after clear to close. The joy when you heard those words.
Oh my goodness. So that's when it did become real. Like, okay,
Mhm.
the lender process of this is done. Clear to close was really that was the word, that was the phrase I was waiting for. And again, Grace and Chad were very instrumental in making sure I understood what that meant. Like, this is, with the anxiousness that you're feeling, like, I was just like, tell me what I need to know or hear in order to say, okay, this is real. And it was that phrase, the clear to close. So we
Okay.
get to clear to close, and then then that at that point, it's logistics, right? Like, you go and you sign your papers. You're waiting for the seller. If they are a current occupant, you do give them that time frame to move out. So you get clear to close, and then you go into a space of saying, okay, let's now schedule close, and you go down to, titling and all that to sign paperwork to make sure that you have everything signed and understood, and then you get possession. And so, but that clear to close moment, that's when the tears happen. That's when I cried. That's when I, said all my hallelujahs, reached out to all the folks I asked to pray for me. I just let them know, like, y'all, this is real. It's happened. Family, I was able to look my children in the eye and say I did it. And, this is not only for me, this is for us. And now I have the narrative and the story to tell you all of how this can be done and how, you are worthy. So that was the moment where the narrative changed. The generational narrative for my family completely changed.
Wow. What has this thought just worth? The generational narrative of my family changed in a course of a few days, right? In the course
Yes.
of not a long period of time, changed the history. So speaking about that, and this may be hard to talk about, but probably needed for our conversation. So before we get to this place, so you grow up in Colorado. Obviously you're talking about grandkids, so you're not 24 years old. We won't go. You're 29, but whatever that age is. So what was going through, or why do you think you were not able to purchase a house through those years where your kids were young, or those years till now where you now are able to do that? And was there even a thought process of needing ownership? What was like you kind of talked about your family and where they were at, but what do you think are those things that kind of stopped you, that we could talk to other folks right now and saying that we don't need that to stop you from being there?
Yeah, I think there's layers of it. So I think
Mhm.
that one, it's lack of financial awareness,
Okay.
not even knowing and realizing. Because in my head at that time, when I was younger and, raising my children, in my head at the time, the number, like I just put this like astronomical number in my head and said, if I don't have this, then I can't purchase a home. So I knew that, like, from a resources perspective, at least in my head, from a resources perspective, I didn't qualify because, I don't have this X number of dollars already available to me in order to make this happen. So that was the first thing. Like, not even knowing what the number is, I already counted myself out. Like, I
Okay.
was telling myself that it's like, you have to have a gazillion dollars in order to close on a house. So there was this fictional, like, cloud of stigma that I put over my head. The other piece I would say is not even thinking about, as a renter, I am paying the mortgage on the property that I'm in, probably not just the mortgage, but the mortgage plus profit.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Yeah.
even equating that to say, wait a second, like the question that you're asking, whose mortgage are you paying? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so, not even like asking myself that question or even venturing to guess an answer. Right. It's just not even equating the two. So just living life like, this is just how you live, right? You live in these spaces, you go and you rent and you hope for a long-term situation that you give your children stability in, etc. And then you take on the increases of rent, and it's frustrating, it's hard, it's hurtful, and you just keep going. You just keep living in that cycle. So I think that was another layer of it. Another layer of it is the systems and structures that are there. I think that it's very unspoken because it's not as prevalent, or it's not admitted, if you will. But there's absolutely still discrimination in the housing space.
Mm-hmm.
When a Black family is looking to move into a community, and that community is not something that Black people are accepted in, real estate agents are very specific in the way that they are shopping people and shopping families into these spaces. So that is another piece. And so when you and I was aware of that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start thinking about the discrimination, now you're like, okay, if I go buy a house, I gotta fight a system. Like, now I gotta fight the system. I gotta fight the system. And so how do you slow your life down to do that when you're raising little children? Right? I mean, do I have time to fight this system while I'm trying to feed these mouths? So there were multiple layers of the reason why I counted myself out. But I think that the internalized piece was probably this, like, thinking about it and reflecting on it now, that's the one that breaks my heart the most, is the
Mm-hmm.
internalized oppression that I did to myself and said, no. And I didn't even know the number. Like, what's the number that you need in order to make it happen? I just made it up. Like, whatever it is, I don't have it. Not
Yeah.
realizing that I could have, there might have been processes and people out there like a Grace or a Chad to support me in that process.
Mhm. Yeah, and then the amount of years that it could have been possible, but we don't
Yes.
know. And then we think of the group that is now that is in apartments. I mean, because in this Denver metro area, they are building a ton of apartment complexes.
Yes.
Not just a few, a ton of them, because they know there's going to be people that are going to be willing to rent those, not knowing that they can experience this thing called home ownership. And so I appreciate you telling us that, because I think that's important for the folks that are listening. I'm assuming you're home right now, right?
I am
All
home.
right. So I want you to just turn around and look at the what's behind you. And then I want to ask you a question.
Turn around and look at what's
It,
behind me here.
right behind you. Oh, there we go. Whose wall is that?
This is my wall.
There you go. You
I
can
am
put
touching my wall.
you can put anything you want on it. And I love
Anything I
you just
love.
the thought of that. I didn't even know that was up there. So it
Yeah.
even worked out even better. But yeah, that's your wall. That's your space. This is your legacy that now begins. And so I guess the last question that I'll ask you is from here, I know you're not thinking, oh, I'm just going to go buy an apartment complex now, but is there in your mind, has it opened up doors for other possibilities to start thinking of yet? Or is it just, I need to get everything moved in? Where are you at in that process right now?
Yeah. So I think I'm kind of like feet in both spaces, getting everything moved in and all that. However, because of the team that I was blessed to be a part of in this space with Chad and with Grace, they're already talking to me about Midian. Now you're in the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's conversations about what equity means. What does that equity mean for you, as far as like if you want to purchase another property, or if you want to be able to be a resource for your family as they lean into home ownership. Conversations are already happening, and not with like this pressure or pushing, because this is now like I'm in a place of joy right now and nobody can steal my joy. But there's already conversations to just say, I'm here. Like, this is something that, this is a lifelong connection. If ever you want to go into this process and experience another transaction, I got you. And that's the part that I love the most about the people that I surrounded myself with, is now we have a shared experience together. Although it was me that was the one that had the tangible asset to where now I own a home, the relationship and the meaningful connection that we were able to make, and now just the story, being able to share story like this, it's now kind of an opportunity to say it can't just be Midian, y'all. It has to be all of us. Like, this is not just my story. Everyone's going to have their own unique, song to it, but this can't just be me. And I refuse to sit idle and just let my story just kind of go into a space of, well, I did this one thing one time. No, I want to tell other people that if you started out like me, or if you have that conditioned mind frame like I did, come out of it. Come out of it. And all it takes is whatever your story is. For me, it took a phone call. A mentor called me and said, how are you feeling? And that's how it started. And this is where it ended, right? Or this is the next
The new
chapter.
beginning, yeah.
Yeah, it's the new beginning of it.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So with that being said, like, if we can make sure that we are leaning in, and if we have the skill sets, the resources, the just the heart, let's make sure that this is something that is available for everybody in our community, especially the Black community. I'm not just saying only the Black community, but I am saying especially the Black community, because we know our history and we know what has happened in our history. And this is now the time for us to reap what those that came before us sowed. They did this for us. They did all of that unjustified resilience for us, for me and you, Brian, to be on a podcast talking about how a Black woman in Denver bought a home.
Hey, I know it is so cool, and that's why, and I hope you can make it to the summit. I'd love for you to be a speaker there as well, and it's on June 19th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Cross Purpose facility right there on Colorado and Martin Luther King. And so this is just the beginning of that as well. The next week I'm going to be doing another a live Zoom on just talking about generational wealth and talking about, how do we pass down? And one of the most important things that you can do once you have a home is have a trust, because a trust avoids probate and that kind of stuff. And so I'll be talking about that, and I'm going to make that work. And so because of your process, I'm going to give you a trust. So
Oh,
you're going to get a trust.
oh,
We're going to make
Brian.
sure that happens. So I
Well,
have the
it's
ability
so
to do
funny.
it.
It's so
Yeah.
funny that you said that, because I was gonna like surprise you on this and say like, okay, I got Grace. I knew then I had to call Chad,
Mhm.
and then my next call was Brian Arnold to make sure that I have a
Yeah.
living trust.
I,
So
I am
you're
going to
giving
give you
me
a trust. You've
everything.
done everything you could. So we're going to make sure you get that.
Oh, my
We'll
goodness.
either start before you get married or right after you get married. So we'll get it all down. It doesn't matter, but we're going to get you into that space. So, yeah, just excited about the possibilities and where you go. And I thank you so much for being on the show and coming on and spending time with us. And for those of you who are just hearing the story for the first time, we're going to put some information down. Call me. If I need to get you in touch with you, because you're going through getting ready, you need to be talked off the ledge.
Yes,
We're gonna get
yes,
together. We're gonna talk you off the ledge, because this needs to happen. It needs to happen now and not in the future. And so
yes.
all those questions that you have, come to the seminar. We'll get those answered. If for whatever reason you can't make it to the seminar and you still have those questions, give us a call. Look forward there. There is one of my podcasts that's a trust seminar. So if you want to watch the whole seminar on why you need to trust, go ahead and watch that. We're going to talk, I'm talking to inspectors, I'm talking to appraisers, I'm talking to people. So you will have an access to listening, but I want you to get access to a group, because it's the community that's going to walk you through this process. It's not the information that you're going to get on this podcast. This podcast should be the catalyst to help you move
Mhm.
into the groups of people and the people that we talk about and the people that we have on here, so that you get what you need, to make this happen. So Medea, again, thank you for being on the show today. This was amazing. We will have you back, I promise, because not only I want to know, but I'm sure the folks that are watching this are going to want to know, what's happening in 6 months. How are you feeling in there? What's the difference? And so I want to do a follow-up show that just
Well,
kind of
yes,
follows your journey, through this.
I would love for everybody to see this wall 6 months later, because there's a plan for this wall,
Oh,
y'all.
nice. Okay, so you have to do it from your house, and you have to do it from
Yes,
that seat,
from
and we'll
this
put it
seat.
on. All
Yes.
right. So
Well,
so
Brian,
thank
thank you for doing what you're doing. I mean, for you to be able to just see the times that we're in and understand that there is a need for us to gather, to come together, and to start changing stories. It's amazing and it's incredible. So thank you for what you're doing as well.
All right. So make sure you go to the website, theBlackWealthExperience.org. Sign up for the conference that is, and I'm almost calling it a workshop, because when you walk out of there, you will have a plan. It won't be a completed plan, but you will know exactly what you need to do in order to start home ownership. So
Well, I'll
do
be
make it.
there.
All
Juneteenth.
right. I
Think of
love it.
another way to spend Juneteenth. Yes.
All right. I love it. We'll talk with everybody soon.